The other thing, you just reminded me, the guys that came back from World War II and also the Korean War, those were our parents.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was an ex-Marine. The guy next door, Bill DeGear, he played for the Brooklyn Dodgers. And he was in the Army. Charlie Case lived across the street, was in the Army. Harley James across the street was in the Army. All these cats had come back from World War II. And I'm not putting anybody down, but those guys all had post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yes.
A lot of them beat their wives.
Mm-hmm.
They most assuredly beat the hell out of their male children, because I went to school with a lot of guys that came to school every day beat up.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them would cover it up by saying they fought this guy or that guy that we all knew were tough, greasy dudes or whatever. But the bottom line was the parents, the dads were beating the shit out of all the people. They called that shell shock. I think
shell shock
about the other day.
Yep.
And now it's post-traumatic stress disorder. And I think at one time in the Civil War, I think they called it soldier's heart.
Soldier's heart. Yeah. I remember reading about that.
That is poor heartbroken. And I was watching the movie the other night, The Wind Talkers, with Nicolas Cage and the other guy. I can't think of his name right now, young guy, but it's all filmed in Monument Valley, which is one of my favorite places, the Navajo Reservation. But that guy, Nicolas Cage, the character he plays, that guy's got post-traumatic stress disorder all through every battle, man. Mm-hmm. And thank God he didn't get to come home, you know what I mean? Because he would have killed everybody in the neighborhood. But anyway, I'm going off topic now, but those guys had a lot of issues, and nobody, they weren't seeking medical help. And guys in that generation, they didn't talk shit, dude.
Yeah.
Back then, a man kept his business to himself.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't lay it on other people. The guys drank a lot. It's like the movie Finding Forrester, where Forrester says, man, when his brother came home from the war, he drank a little bit more and he talked a little bit less.
Yep.
And that's how a lot of these cats were. They drank a lot more. My dad never drank because his dad was an alcoholic gambler and stuff. But everybody else drank, and they talked a little less. And it wasn't about sharing your feelings and all this stuff that we got now, man. Not that there's anything wrong with sharing your feelings. I think those guys would have been a lot better off had they admitted they were having problems and sought out help. But they just took it out on the wife and kids and the dog, dude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's where that kind of recklessness.
Yep.
And, once you've seen death, dude, you don't give a shit.
Right. You don't care.
You're not afraid of it anymore. And these guys, they saw it every day.
Yep.
They saw it every day. And then those guys come back and their kids end up going to Vietnam and fighting a really pointless war over there. At least the guys who fought in Japan could kind of justify doing that because the Japanese attacked us at Pearl Harbor. But from then on, every other battle we've been involved in has been a political battle and skirmish and fought by political rules rather than warfare.
Right, exactly. Here's another interesting aspect of the guys that came back from World War II that started this style. A lot of those guys, like you said, that they'd seen death, they were fearless, and they became very reckless. A lot of soldiers, when they come back, are always looking for that adrenaline, that high that they once had in the war.
Yeah.
And they need that. And motorcycle riding at that time was a good way to do that. And the way the clubs formed is you figured you had a bunch of these guys that would end up meeting up and they say, well, hey, man, like we're all the same. We're all in the same kind of thing. We like to drink. We like to party. We like to fight. We like to ride motorcycles. And, hey, we should start a club, like a lot of the, like the Army Air Corps guys and stuff like that. They had their planes, like the Flying This or the Betty Lou, and they'd have like the pinups painted on the sides of the planes and stuff like that. So what they did, that's kind of a lot of times
really good art.
Yeah, it was too. And a lot of it that's kind of where that came from. These clubs, this brotherhood type thing. That's really where most of your all of your motorcycle gangs here in the U.S. stem from. Was, you know, that philosophy, so to speak. And another interesting aspect about the greasers, the guys that became the bikers, the greasers, and stuff like that, you figure those guys that went into World War II, when they left the country to go fight, it was a very different country. They were still on the ass end of the Great Depression. So they had to make do with what they had. They saw the toughness of life, not enough money to go around, trying to work odd jobs where they could to make a few bucks so they could buy some food at the grocery store. Everything was sparse. It was scarce. People were fighting for position and rank and money. So it was kind of like the Wild West, and it was real tough at that time. So you figure, okay, these guys are now, you know, in their late teens into their early 20s. They're going off to war. They fight. They, you know, survive. They come back. Business is booming. The country has money. People are happy. Everything's great, and, you know, industry is booming. So they come back, and I can imagine what that would feel like, going, what the fuck is this shit, man? What do you mean 2.5, you know, kids and a white picket fence and a 1950 or 1940 something Chevrolet? You know, it's like, what? No, like, that's not what I come from. I don't understand this shit. This is what? I don't get this, you know?
You guys are living in luxury, man.
Right, exactly. So I always thought that was also a big part of what made that style from those original era guys, is because they grew up in a very, very rough time where they didn't have, and there was nothing around to comfort them. Basically, it was what they could do for themselves, and, you know, they were pretty tough cats. They really were. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, well, they were used to dealing with themselves and for themselves and getting by on their own, and
mm-hmm.
and they were self-sufficient. They weren't beggars.
Right.
You didn't see those guys out on the street asking for money.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? They'd go get jobs. They worked in those days. You could work at the gas station,
mm-hmm.
because there was a guy that actually pumped the gas. There were guys who cleaned your windows.
Yeah.
There were guys who checked your oil. You know, it wasn't like you go in there and hand your credit card to the guy, or just pay at the pump. You know what I mean? It's not like it's now, you know?
Right. Well, think Soda Pop and Steve from The Outsiders. Where did they work? DX Gasoline.
Right. And you could actually, at that time, and even a little bit after that time, I graduated in '68, and I personally knew people who, the guy had started at the gas station, worked his way up, and he was a mechanic at the Phillips 66 station,
mm-hmm.
and his girlfriend worked at the Dairy Queen.
Dairy Queen, yeah.
And between both of them, they bought like a little 2-bedroom house, dude, and had a car.
Yeah.
You know, I work at the Dairy Queen, and he works at the Phillips 66, and we got a kid on the way. And man, I don't know how you do that now. I don't know if you can do that now.
No, not
maybe
not
in
anymore.
Oklahoma things are cheaper.
Yeah,
it's a lot cheaper back there now. I can get a good, like, 2-bedroom apartment for $500-$600 a month in Oklahoma.
Yep.
And out here it's $1,800, $2,000 a month for a
mm-hmm.
2-bedroom.
Oh yeah.
But you get less money back there too. Gas is everything is cheaper, but you get paid less back there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, and
that goes back to what I was saying before about being a greaser was an economic dilemma more than a choice.
Right.
I think when you went to Cabrillo, was that a choice for you to be a greaser?
Yeah.
Or did you just feel like, because that place was like, we got black people and Mexicans, dude. I don't know any black greasers. You know what I mean? I don't know if they exist or not.
They do, and they did, and
Mexican
they still
greasers,
do.
There's probably could be Mexican greasers. You know what I mean?
Well, I can explain that. I can explain a lot of that. Yeah, I can explain how that all actually worked. Now there are black greasers. There actually were back in the day in the 50s, and there are still to this day. There's not a lot of them, but there are some that still really dig the style. There's ones that want to get into it, you know. And to me, greasers are greasers. We're all brothers. You know what I mean? We're all brothers in arms, so to speak, or in leather. And here's the thing about, because all the greasers I knew, except for like one cat, they were all Mexican. See, even in the 50s, they had, you know, the Mexicans were greasers as well, you know, along with like the Jews, the Irish, the Italians, you know, all of that. They were, you know, depending on, again, back then.
All would make great greasers, dude.
Yeah. And see, here's the thing. The really cool thing about the Mexican greasers is they've kept it alive in California. California is the stronghold for the rockabilly greaser culture. Now, when I went to high school, I didn't start out as a greaser. I started in 9th grade. I saw greasers for like the first time in person. I mean, I grew up watching old movies, old TV shows. That's because of my dad. You know, he's a little older than you. He's in his 70s now. And, you know, I grew up watching all this stuff. And by the time I was 4, I had a leather jacket, I had jeans, and I had cowboy boots. And I loved wearing that kind of stuff when I was a kid. Now I'm in high school. I'm a new boot, and I see greasers walk, and I go, oh, man, I want to be a part of that. That's fucking cool. You know, it's because growing up for me, the guys that were cool were the ones that had the long greasy hair, that had, you know, you know, the earrings, you know, the leather jackets, the ripped up jeans, the, you know, motorcycle boots, and those were like the bad boys, the cool ones. And, you know, everyone was like, wow. I mean, you always see the stereotype in every show at that time growing up. You always see that one character that comes by and he's got the long rocker hair and the, you know, the leather jacket. He rides a motorcycle. The guy,
like Fonzie,
like Fonzie and stuff like that. You go, wow, you know, that's the guy to be. That's cool. I mean, and you could think of it, even like in a lot of the 90s.
What was that guy's name?
Even
Eddie and Fathers Knows Best.
Yeah, yeah. You think of like even some of like the sitcoms and stuff from like the 80s and 90s. Like I remember watching what was it? Married with Children. You know, Kelly was always dating some guy riding a motorcycle. Who was wearing jeans and engineer boots and long hair and tattoos. And then you figure you had like the show Full House. Who was the cool one on there? Uncle Jesse with the greased hair, you know, the pompadour. And he always rode a motorcycle, wore tight jeans and leather jackets and stuff. It's like that was always drilled into my head. So by the time I got into high school, I was like, oh man, these are the guys. These guys are fucking cool. And I didn't know shit about it. I had to learn by doing. And we had all kinds of groups.
Leave It to Beaver.
Yeah, Leave It to Beaver.
Leave It to Beaver. There was the Cleavers, June Cleaver, and then the Sons Beaver, and I forget his older brother's name, but his older brother's friend was Eddie.
Eddie Haskell.
Eddie was this blonde greaser dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, Eddie Haskell. That was his name. Yeah.
Eddie Haskell.
Oh, hi, Mrs. Cleaver. You know, he was always pulling some shit.
And then when she would leave, he'd be like, oh, come on, Gertrude, get with the times. You got to catch on, man. You know?
Right, yeah.
He would switch.
Behind her back, dude.
Yeah. But for me, growing up as a greaser, I mean, it wasn't easy because it was different, first off. I mean, you had all kinds of subcultures in Cabrillo. You had punk rockers, you had metalheads, you had skaters.
You had everything, man.
Yeah. See, when I first got in, the greasers that had established, I guess, how things were going to go in Cabrillo at the time, we had war on two fronts with punk rockers and pretty boys. You know, the guys that with the perfect lineups and the real baggy pro clubs and all the, you know, the bling and this, that, and the other. We had beef with both. And I remember I didn't know about it, and I had beef with none of them because it's like, fuck, that's not my war. I didn't start that. I don't have anything against punk rockers. I got nothing against pretty boys, but I'm supposed to have, you know, a problem with them. By the time I had my own spot and had broken away from the main factions, and you know, took my guys with me that we were all close and friends. We started our own spot together. By that point, you know, we had everybody represented in our crew. It's like, you guys can hang out if you're cool. We had punk rockers, greasers, psychobillies. We had metalheads. We had one of my friends was a gangster from LA, and he hung out with us. So like we had a big group of guys. But the guys I always hung out with were greasers. I still do. All those guys from high school that I knew that I hung with, I still know to this day, and I still talk to on a regular basis. And I tell you, man, like we pulled some shit.
The one thing I forgot to say earlier was we had all these different schools in Tulsa. I mean, even bad side of town. The only we had Booker T. Washington was the black high school, but there were greasers primarily at Webster, McLean, Sand Springs, and Central High School downtown. But every school had greasers.
Mm-hmm.
Every school had them. And the other thing you could do in Tulsa schools was you could smoke cigarettes.
Right.
But they had a designated place they called the smoke hall, and it was different for every school. But I guarantee you, man, on breaks, lunch break, you could find all the greasers in the smoke hall, dude, because they would all be out smoking.
Right. Right.
And you could always count on the cigarette off a greaser because they always smoked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Here's a question for you.
My brother used to hang out there. That's when we got introduced to marijuana, was Al May and this other dude, Ken Mihalik. They moved from California to Tulsa. And at the smoke hall, they would come out and they would bring joints. And we would smoke weed in the smoke hall. And all the greasers would go, "Hey, man, what's that shit you're smoking, dude?" "Oh, man, it's a different cigarette, you know. Here, try it." And then pretty soon they'd all come around where everybody was smoking weed. You know, that was like 67, 68.
Right.
Right around there. And the authorities never caught on, dude, because they didn't come out in the smoke hall. Some of the teachers smoked, so they might come out. But
right.
That was when I got introduced to weed, was in the smoke hall at Memorial High School.